Hello and welcome to another edition of MHQ's Foundation 101 webcast, where today, as very often, I'm joined by the excellent Kat Zagati. Kat, good morning.
Good morning, Jan.
We have, over the past couple of editions, talked about almost every asset class in the books, but I do not believe that we talked about this one. Today, we are talking and going digital.
Bitcoin, crypto, digital assets, tokens. These words have all been part of the zeitgeist of financial innovation. If one invested £10,000 into Bitcoin on 1st of April 2016, let's say, one would have been worth a hard to believe £1.4 million 5 years later. This is a return of nearly 14,000%. Today, Bitcoin's market capitalization is almost on par with Amazon's. With such potential returns, it is unsurprising that dynamic investors and entrepreneurs are keen to get into the action. Crypto, as they say, is here to stay, isn't it? The same entrepreneurs will often be keen on consolidating across all asset classes, digital or not, and implementing an asset protection and legacy planning strategy. So here is my first question to you, Jan. Are foundation and digital assets compatible?
Well, in short, the answer is an emphatic yes. And as we will see, early planning is essential given the specific challenges that the asset classes poses.
I see. You mentioned challenges. Can you elaborate a little bit on this, please?
So first, there is the access challenge. So clients frequently experience difficulties in accessing digital assets on the death or incapacity of a family member. So this can cause distress, frustration across the board, like with any other asset, but this is enhanced for this one. Then there is the lack of consistency among digital custodians as to whether ownership of the digital assets is actually transferable upon death. So many of these digital assets end up constrained by service providers themselves. So the key takeaway here is that if one does not plan for his digital assets early enough, these assets will likely be invisible, inaccessible, non-transferable upon incapacity or death. And this is where a consolidation under a legacy planning tool provides immediate value.
Okay. And what are the solutions, please?
So first off, like for any assets, you can apply simple pragmatic steps and they can go a long way. I mean, these can include creating and maintaining inventories, assets and key ledgers, questions and checklists. So very simple tool. And in this context, structuring from scratch, from inception is really recommended, as it will facilitate the monitoring and help document the entire ownership history. And that is a must when you deal with regulators or financial institutions, as we will discuss in a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm. And with respect to consolidation, why foundations over other tools such companies or even trusts?
So a company can be considered as a consolidation tool, but a foundation, in my opinion, provides benefits beyond the mere corporatization and housekeeping. So as we know, the foundation is an independent legal entity with distinct personality, separate from the one of its founder. And that allows the foundation to hold assets in its own name. So the assets are settled onto the foundation and become the sole property of this foundation. They are no longer subject as a result to third-party attacks, think creditors, divorce, or probate, what we discussed before, someone passing away in a succession procedure being open. Now, there is something to be said about how suited foundations are to deal with volatility of the investment, like cryptocurrencies. something a traditional trust will struggle with. Because volatility is a real thing in the crypto world. You mentioned it before on the upside as a counterexample. If you had invested 10,000 pounds into Bitcoin in December 2017 and sold it just a year later, you would have lost about 3/4 of the value. So talk about upside, but also the downside, right? So this volatility will conflict with the trustee's duty to preserve and enhance the value of the trust property. But in a foundation, unlike in a trust, the foundation per se does not owe any fiduciary obligations to the beneficiaries. So you can take a little bit more risk in terms of allocation of assets, volatility, etc. So a foundation makes it much easier as well for the founder to be part of the action, to be directly involved in the management of the foundation's assets, be it as a council member, a holder of delegated investment power, or the like.
Yeah, it looks like foundation and digital assets are an ideal match, indeed.
Well, if you make it short, the answer would be yes, but I will caveat it with one point, which is, and we touched upon it at the top, serious regulators, as well as providers like us, for example, will focus on documenting the source of wealth of every applicant as part of the initial application. And demonstrating the provenance of the assets and the funds initially used to acquire these digital assets is key in this context. So it is very much advisable to subject crypto wallets as soon as practically possible to what we call a forensic audit, which is a review of the entire history since the coin was mined, particularly when dealing with regulators, in our context as part of the registration of a foundation or financial institution, and using that wallet content as the source of wealth. So we do not provide that service at MHQ, but we have peers, excellent firm that we work with that do provide that service. And it is an absolute must if you want to present that to regulators.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And I think we talk next week because
yes,
the topic is endless. So let's talk next week. Thanks a lot for joining.
Pleasure. Thank you.